All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We are taking a deep dive into the fascinating and honestly deeply contrarian financial philosophy of Robert Kiyosaki. Through this fully animated breakdown, we're going to challenge some of the most foundational beliefs society holds about money, security, and success. So get ready to look at wealth from an entirely different perspective.
I want you to really absorb this quote. The paycheck was one of the most damaging things you can take in your life. It's jarring, right? That's a direct lesson Kiyosaki learned from his mentor, who he calls his rich dad, and it perfectly sets the stage for the shock of this whole mindset shift. Look, he isn't saying that earning money is inherently bad. Rather, he argues that the very moment you accept a paycheck, you adopt an employee mindset, you become dependent, and it actually changes who you are on a fundamental level.
Part 1. The obsolete life plan.
Go to school, get a good job, save your money, get out of debt, invest for the long term in the stock market. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? For generations, this was literally the unquestioned golden checklist for a good, secure life. But according to the source material, Kiyosaki aggressively debunks these highly ingrained societal steps. He argues that holding on to these rigid ideas today leads directly to obsolete results.
So, why does he call it obsolete? Well, according to this framework, traditional financial advice fails because the rules of the game literally changed. Back in 1971, President Nixon took the US off the gold standard, which effectively turned money into debt. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing trillions of dollars being printed limitlessly. And then, factor in Moore's Law, the idea that information doubles every 18 months. The economic environment we are operating in today is just completely different.
Which brings us to a really interesting rhetorical question. Do brains have an expiration date? Think about it. When you grab a carton of milk at the supermarket, you always check the expiration date. But Kiyosaki points out that most people never check the expiration date on their own knowledge. If information is doubling every 18 months, relying on what you learned decades ago is a massive liability.
Part 2. Why savers are losers.
Yeah, savers are losers and cash is trash. It is an incredibly bold claim for sure, but Kiyosaki's stance is that because central banks are printing so much money, the financial system actually penalizes those who try to save it. Today, banks are essentially charging you interest to hold your money because there is simply way too much of it circulating. Saving cash, in his view, just means you are quietly being crushed by inflation.
Part 3. The paycheck trap.
Let's talk about what we'll call the Xerox dilemma. On one hand, you have Kiyosaki, who left his comfortable corporate job at Xerox after getting a $30,000 bonus check. He had no money for years, he failed, but he resolved to never go back. On the other hand, his coworker John also left. He also failed, but John immediately returned to the safety of the corporate fold. Kiyosaki argues that the absolute lack of a safety net is exactly what forces the hunger and intelligence required to actually succeed.
Because of this, we kind of need to completely redefine the word entrepreneur. In this philosophy, an entrepreneur is not just someone who opens a business. It is a mindset first, a distinct skill set, and a totally different set of rules. Kiyosaki views entrepreneurship as a profound internal test of character. It's a crucible. It reveals who you become when you have absolutely nothing to fall back on. Do you cheat and steal, or do you become a better human being?
Moving on to Part 4. Rethinking debt and taxes.
Take a look at this staggering number, $750,000. That represents the massive tax bill of a doctor friend of Kiyosaki's who excitedly announced he finally made $1 million in a single year. By working for money as a highly paid employee, his friend got absolutely crushed by taxes, severely cutting into his net take-home pay. It perfectly illustrates how high-earning traditional workers are penalized by the tax system.
Now contrast that with the 4-to-1 step-up. Kiyosaki outlines his personal strategy of legally paying zero tax by utilizing debt. When he makes $1 million, he doesn't take it as a taxable paycheck. Instead, he invests it in real estate, which then allows him to get $4 million from the bank. He actively uses debt. For instance, he talks about refinancing $300 million in debt at lower interest rates, from 5% down to 2.5%, to acquire assets that put more money in his pocket every single month.
It's wild because the exact same financial tools, debt and taxes, have completely opposite effects depending on your mindset. For employees and savers, debt and taxes just make them poorer. They get taxed on their labor and squeezed by interest. But for real estate entrepreneurs, debt is a tool for leverage, and taxes are minimized through incentives. Ultimately, it makes them richer.
But watch out, because here is a massive trap. Out of the 28 million small business owners in America, A staggering 24 million are one-person, non-employee entrepreneurs. Simply working for yourself doesn't automatically mean you are playing by big business rules. In fact, Kiyosaki points out that these self-employed individuals often pay the highest taxes of all because they're still operating with an employee mindset, just without a corporate boss.
Which brings us to Part 5, your internal economy. There's this profound juxtaposition between these two economies. The external economy is completely dependent on jobs, it gets crushed by a bad economy, and it is terrified of failure. But the internal economy, that is all about inside control. In the internal economy, you use your mistakes to get smarter. A real entrepreneur with an internal focus doesn't even see a bad economy. They just see an opportunity to stand back up and go higher, no matter what is happening externally.
If you think the economy is bad, it's because your economy is bad. That really emphasizes the core lesson of this explainer. True entrepreneurs don't actually care about the external economy. Their very first job is establishing complete control inside their own minds. Everything they achieve comes through that internal willpower and focus.
So that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question for you to ponder. Are you operating in the external economy or your internal economy? Where do you source your control? Do you rely on a paycheck and fear the market, or do you rely on your own mindset to thrive regardless of the circumstances? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I hope it challenged you to fundamentally rethink your own rules of wealth and control.